Welcome everyone to the Ask an Architect show. Here with me today, David Fersh. David, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
David has a really interesting path and a really interesting specialty kind of in the VR, AR world. A lot with technology that I want to dive into. But before I do, real quick, David, for our audience, kind of the 15-20 second overview. Who are you and what are you doing right now?
I'm David Fersh. I'm an architect right across the street at SmithGroupJJR. Mm-hmm. I work in our workplace studio, and I also spend a portion of my time working with our National Technology and Practice Group, which does all kinds of fun stuff from data and analytics to how we're using our BIM to fun stuff like AR, VR, 3D printing,
Very cool.
Visualization tools.
Now, I want to get into the fun stuff, but you are a practicing architect. You mentioned a workplace studio, so let's start with that. What is workplace studio? What is workplace? Is that corporate, commercial, office environments? What kind of stuff are you guys doing there?
Yeah, we kind of use workplace as a catch-all that doesn't fit
it's a kind of a catch-all word.
Into our other categories. So, it's not higher education, it's not cultural, museum, it's not healthcare. But we use it to catch sort of anything office related, or our residential work sort of fits into that as well.
So the word is very strategic.
Sure.
In a catch-all sense. So the other part of your job is the AR, VR technology kind of aspect, pushing the boundaries and pushing the edge of what SmithGroupJJR does with technology, fair to say? So what kinds of things are you working on? What's in the lab over there that you can tell us about right now?
Well, I think we're really just trying to find ways to use everything new that's coming out. So, we're just sort of keeping our ears to the ground and seeing what's coming. So there's all kinds of, there's all kinds of VR tools out there now. We've got an HTC Vive hooked up in our lobby, so that came out, about a year ago, and that's been something. Well, how do we use it? How do we use it intelligently? So, does it work? How does it work within our workflows? So, can our designers use it in a smart way at an early stage in design? Can we use it for a presentation tool? We're always looking into the cell phone technology and how are we presenting things, whether it be on the phone or with an iPad, or I just got a Microsoft HoloLens at my desk, which I'm just starting to play with. We've done a little bit more nationally to play around with that. But
what kinds of abilities does that allow you guys to take advantage of?
I think it lets us showcase our work in unique ways. So, to be for me, I'm all in. Obviously, I've bought, but I think looking at things in the virtual world is sort of a different way of viewing projects. That's much more relatable to the average person. So, most people don't know how to read a plan necessarily, but you live in 3D every day. So if we
you can experience it
that. Yeah, it's a different experience.
So you guys are like a little petri dish over there of experimentation, staying on the cutting edge. So how do you learn this stuff? How do you know how to use it? Are you reading Wired Magazine? Are you going to South by Southwest? What are you doing to become an expert in technology that's brand new?
A lot of Google.
Yeah. You got a PhD in Google.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's something that everyone should learn to do more of. Yeah. There's so much information.
That's fantastic tactical advice. Yeah.
Learn the Google.
Yeah.
I think it's just being, I think for me, I saw when VR came into our office, I wasn't the VR expert. I actually wasn't even, fully involved in our technology group. But, I thought, hey, that's cool. I'd like to learn how to do that. So you get a couple lessons from someone else, and then all of a sudden, you know as much as anyone. Yeah. And when you know as much as anyone, then it's your job to sort of continue to learn. And it's actually, easier at that point, right? You're you're already there, and you're just staying on top of what's coming out. And if someone else finds something else that's newer and better, hey, I'd like to learn from you. So
It's interesting how you frame that, because there's a Malcolm Gladwell book called Outliers, and talks about 15,000 hours to being an expert. And he talks about how a lot of, with youth sports, people who get in earlier, get those hours earlier, they become all-stars, they play more, they travel more, they do it more. With you in technology, slowly or quickly, you kind of become the expert because nobody else has that knowledge. So then people come to you and you gain more experience and more experience. And so you actually probably get to those 15,000 hours pretty quickly just by jumping in, like you said, doing the Google search, becoming an expert pretty quickly. Now you are the expert. What else at Smith Group JJR other than AR and VR are you guys kind of experimenting with? Is there anything software-wise? Is there any other hardware that you guys are playing around with? Drone technology?
Yeah, well, we're doing all kinds of stuff. In DC, drones are hard.
Sure.
You can't fly them, but I know out in our Phoenix office, we've
Yeah.
been doing a good bit of stuff with drones, which is pretty cool. We're doing, in our Chicago office, we just opened a new office. We've sort of built out the majority of it, but there's a section unbuilt that we're going to finish, and we're actually doing tracking of movement through our office space. So we're seeing what spaces people are using, and then applying that data to the future design. That's
what technology are you using there? Infrared or like some kind of movement technology?
I believe it's a GPS tracking
Okay.
system. So they've got little sensors plugged in all over the office that tracks, and then everyone's got a little card that they sort of opt into if you're in, and hopefully I got that about right.
So let me ask you, when things start to prove themselves in your studio or lab or whatever you want to call it, how does it then get rolled out to client implementation? At what point does a principal come in and say, hey, I want to try that on this project? Does that happen? Or
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think more times than not, the way you learn it is by going to a project and saying, hey, I think we could do this, it would be really cool. That's when you really get to spend the time.
Yep.
And say, and then we do it for one project.
Yep.
This would be a good project for this. I think I can make this work.
Gotcha.
Give me a couple days. Let me see if I can figure this out. And then it works for that project, and then we tell that story, and we say, hey, we did for this project, and this worked great. We should do it again. Or this didn't work that well. I think we could improve it.
Yep.
Here's how I think we could improve it next time.
So how much of your time would you say is the architecture practice, and how much of your time would you say is the technology experimentation?
So my technical split is like about 3/4, 1/4. So
Okay.
that's 1/4 on the technology side now. What I like to say is, in the ideal world, I'm finding projects that are blend it. So
Yep.
that then I'm
Makes sense.
working on cool stuff, and we're getting to use the latest technology.
Yeah.
And do a little more.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to note, is that if things have to be practical and they have to be used. So it's one thing to experiment and be toying around, but if it doesn't have a practical application, then what's the point? So blending it together is critical. So tell me about your life pre-technology, when you were just coming up through the ranks and maybe just practicing traditional architecture. What kind of stuff were you working on then? Were you still involved in BIM and CAD and the forefront of that, or were you actually involved in something else or more interested in other things?
Yeah. So I guess I had sort of maybe if I go backwards a little bit, I had a little bit of a unique entry into the field, and I finished school at grad school, architecture school at RISD.
Okay.
I came back to DC, and I actually worked. I did some furniture design and some product design work, and I worked in a wood shop out in Rockville, the Woodworkers Club, which is an awesome place. And I taught classes and built some things, and I sort of did some freelance work for some smaller firms. So that was sort of my right out of school. I wasn't exactly practicing architecture, and then I came to Smith Group, and I started at Smith Group sort of in a temporary role to begin with, and work my way up. So I was all over at Smith Group when I started working on different projects in all of our different studios, and just sort of learning everything I could, I guess. So
it just highlights that you can never really plan your exact path, because it sounds like maybe even at RISD, going into the AR, VR, tech world wasn't something that was always front and center. You have a very analog balance to your tech side, working with furniture and doing that kind of design work. So David, kind of talking to our audience here, who many are on the cusp of graduation, about to go into the workforce. They're looking at somebody like you or somebody in your position and thinking, wow, that could be a really attractive, sexy, edgy, cool niche to get into. What advice would you give to those people about how to get into this field? If they want to dive into AR, VR, and drones and all that, what should they be thinking about considering doing right now?
So I would say just experiment, try things out, look for opportunities, whatever's out there when you're in school, and when you get to a firm, let people know what you're interested in and reach out. And if the opportunity isn't there to do it, and you think something's really interesting, you can learn about it on your own. And then, eventually there's the chance where you let someone know and you say, hey, look at this cool thing I can do. Hey, let's invest in it. And then your value is even more.
Great point. I think, we're always talking about adding value on the show, and, you come from a large firm with a lot of resources that are really kind of driving the boat on this, but there's probably also opportunities at smaller firms that don't have any of this type of technology, but really see a lot of value in somebody coming in and helping them get off the ground in it. So, don't just think it's only one place with a lot of resources, but certainly it helps if you're experimenting and on the forefront to have all that Smith Group JJR probably offers you. So David, what are you doing outside of work that keeps you motivated, keeps you excited? While the technology stuff is probably pretty interesting, I imagine, at the end of the day, you want something to balance your life out a little bit. What do you do outside of the 9 to 5, 9 to 9, whatever it might be?
I guess I do a lot of different things. I'm a sports nut, but I still go back to the shop. I teach classes a couple times a year, so I teach an intro to furniture class, and I love getting back into the shop and stepping away from the computer for a little bit.
For sure.
It's a nice change up for sure.
Yeah, it's good to have an analog and digital balance in your life. Well, David, this has been a really interesting look into the AR VR world for our audience. Last tips, thoughts here. Where do you see the future of this type of technology going? I mean, we all know right now we have the goggles, we're doing a lot of AR stuff, there's voice coming out, a lot more of that type of technology, drones are being implemented more. Where do you see all of this going? Is there something else on the horizon that you're looking at experimenting with next? What else is piquing your interest? What's the future of all of this? What's the next technology?
I think things are just going to get faster and
better.
And right now we have this big distinction between VR and AR. And I think there's just going to be a blend in the future to some degree, right? So we're trying to build smarter and smarter models as a way of delivering our project and understanding our building. And there's just going to be more and more information embedded, and it's going to be more and more ways to access it. Whether that be walking around on a construction site with an AR viewer, or a completed building that the building engineer has access to every property of that entire building as its life moves forward.
Yeah. So more information, more data, and hopefully that leads to better buildings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, David, this has been a good look into the AR, VR tech world. If you're interested, David is at Smith Group JJR here in the DC office. We've had a few people from that office on this show, so check out those episodes as well. David, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you coming over today, and we'll see you next time on the Ask an Architect Show.